Hello and welcome to Blowback, exposing the decline of empire. I think that's Billy Bob's title. Unfortunately, two of our soldiers are out. What do we usually say? On assignment. So Billy Bob couldn't make it today. Carlo is still not feeling better, but he said Tuesday is probably better for him, so he'll be back. But we still have a nice 3-point panel. So we have Ian from the suburbs of, it looks like very sunny Moscow, and Leo from, a
Berlin.
suburb somewhere in Berlin, where I think it's stormy and the internet is not perfect, so we might have just lost visual, but at least he's still part of the chat. We had some connectivity issues before, and I think the title, one of the three, he's back, became overextended and doubling down, and it really feels like that's the direction the leadership, not the cadaver in the White House, but the leadership in the West is going on when confronted with multiple crises. But to get us started, I think we wanted to talk about the biggest news of the week that's got everybody, I think, for me, hugely motivated, which was Putin's Asia summit. Now, there's plenty of video you can see from he first went to Pyongyang DPRK, where he hasn't been in 24 years, I think. First year in presidency, 2000 was the last time he went. Classic ally of the Soviet Union. I mean, the higher leadership of the country still all speak Russian. It's beautiful. And there's plenty of videos. So there was a hug there. There was a hug in Pyongyang. I didn't know Asian people were the huggers, but it turns out that, yeah, maybe I was wrong, or maybe it's that significant or that important when Putin comes around. I mean, CNN described it as like greeting a superstar Tsar, or really, really jealous stuff. It sent everybody bonkers and mad. But before we get into the details and the history, again, many videos, you can see them hugging, saying goodbye, the people on the streets. But I actually wanted to start with something Russian speakers and Hungarian speakers will probably know. Let me actually, preface this. This is from the 1938 movie Circus, or Circus, the main theme, which goes with which is "Broad is my country," I think, in Russian, and I'm going to try not to butcher it, but it might make the Russian speakers feel bad. It's "Shiraka strana moya radnaya," I think, and "Drago that was the Hungarian version, and you can see this, but not just in the same tune that I hummed, but completely DPRkized, right? It's optimistic, it's jumpy. It's have a quick listen to this one. I think I made sure that this time there is sound.
Я другой такой страны не знаю, где так вольно дышит человек. Узнаете, именно эта мелодия сейчас здесь звучит на площади Ким Ир Сена.
In the middle of Pyongyang, the DPRK, under sanctions since it fucking existed, there were still famines in the 2000s because of those sanctions, and they're never coming again. We'll get into the details of what was agreed on, but what were you guys' initial thoughts as you watched from Russia or Germany?
Just jubilation. I mean, it makes me happy. It makes me deeply, deeply joyous to see such unification between these two resolute anti-imperialist forces since forever, since always. I mean, Russia never changed its anti-imperialist stance after the defeat of the Soviet Union, and the DPRK, I think, is even less known and less understood in the West. How much of a resolute anti-imperialist this country has been, even when they have been strangulated for its entire existence, economically, diplomatically isolated, even in its weakened developmental phase. The DPRK, North Korea, has supported every single anti-colonial struggle. Well, maybe not every single one, but
and they don't recognize Israel, by the way. Yeah.
And what?
The only country I think that just doesn't recognize Israel, never has.
Right. Yes, absolutely. But on the African continent, so many different anti-colonial wars were militarily supported by North Korea, and this is something that Westerners absolutely are not told about in their education, in their history classes. So there's a long history of anti-imperialism in North Korea.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to get the Russian perspective straight from Ian, but I think the DPRK perspective has been that the Russians haven't been such a good ally, especially in the 90s and 2000s. And thank God things are back to the roots, back where they belong. But what do you think, Ian?
I think it's true. I mean, because it's true in the 1990s, there was a fairly severe famine in North Korea. And you can look up, like, if you look up the charts of Russian aid excuse me, Soviet aids, because there was trade and aid from the Soviet Union to North Korea, and it all fell off a cliff, of course. And Russia was just unable to do anything because they had their own very serious problems in the 1990s. They just weren't even in a position to do it. I don't know about the Russian perspective per se, except that it's more of they don't share the paranoia for North Korea that Western, American and Western European audiences do. It's a normal place to go for tourism or for snowboarding. That's apparently a thing some people, Russians, do, go snowboarding.
That's increasing. I think last year the breakthrough was it was still Shoigu, right? The breakthrough visit to North Korea, and they issued this visa-free come travel, have a holiday here. That was last year. Yeah.
So I think it's a big sign that's the sanctions as a weapon was overplayed. A lot of people were saying that going after Russia, a major power, this aggressive. A lot of people were saying that, or even before the sanctions from hell were implemented, people were saying this even when they were just being threatened. It's like, that's a bridge too far. That's overplaying it. That's over weaponizing it. And the risk is that once it's played, it's no good as a threat, and then it just loses its meaning.
That's the thing. I place it completely at the feet of the West. Russia didn't do this. Putin didn't do this. The EU, Ursula announced, just now introduced their 14th round of sanctions on Russia, which for the first time includes LNG. I don't know what the fuck they're stuck on, but this move, by the way, geographically, North Korea has like this tri-border. There's a point where there's three countries, if you look around. There's China, there's Russia, and there's People's Korea, best Korea, right? Yeah. And of course, the West already tried to be like paranoid in all their headlines. They shouldn't even be allowed to travel. This is a violation of international law. And the other angle they're trying, this will piss off China. This will be very, very bad. Fuck. I mean, the first guy who actually hugged Putin and it sent shockwaves around the world was Xi Jinping. Don't you think they discussed every aspect of this? Every aspect of it. I mean, it's the death of sanctions. There's never going to be any food shortages in People's Korea anymore. But let's get on to the substantive points. What they basically somewhat already had in place with Vietnam, which we'll get to at the second point, is this comprehensive strategic partnership, which they inked, which is every level, culture, military, commerce, technology, but they really picked out military and military technology. There is a clause in there. Either of this joint partnership get attacked, then joint response. I mean, it's not like exactly like an Article 5, but I think the wording, which hasn't been completely released by the North Korean side, might be. I mean, the 1961 the Soviet DPRK. What do you call it? Not non-aggression, but military mutual aid pact. Right? I mean, it's significant. Putin went to the big, the people's heroes, fallen heroes, which is the Red Army. I mean, everybody knows the Soviet Union liberated Western Europe from the Nazis. Like 87% of them died to the Red Army's hands. But then he went into Manchuria and fucking like a hot knife through butter, just slashed through the best Japanese army, the Kwantung Army, together side by side with these people. And this isn't just opportunistic, like what the West does, horse trading diplomacy. There's actual historic memory here. That's why I thought it was so significant, so beautiful. I mean, the other videos include them driving each other, very cute. Putin drives the big Aurus Senat thing that he gifted Kim Jong-un, and then Kim drives him around, and they're just laughing all the time. He got these very rare I forgot which one they were, but Korean breed puppies. Obviously, you know, Putin's a dog person. But the main thing is fuck your sanctions, which are actually UN sanctions, but, you know, it's done. It's over. You've been reintegrated, just like Iran. Thoughts on the actual agreements? What do you guys think? And consequences or messages this sends to the West?
Further consolidation of the multipolar camp for further strengthening. It was going to happen sooner or later. It's beautiful that it's happening now.
Yeah. And it had the South, you know, Yoon Suk-yeol, who has been very increasingly warlike in his rhetoric. Like, immediately, I'm summoning the Russian ambassador. I'm calling Blinken. That sent them into a panic. It sent Japan into a panic, because that's where those islands begin. And it's just beautiful to see. So this is the Asian part of BRICS or the multipolar order. But there's another thing. Sergei Ryabkov, who is the deputy foreign minister under Lavrov of Russia, recently announced that there is a basic principle, a test, if you like, to join BRICS, which currently 59 nations are lining up to join. And that is no sanctions on any members. I mean, that's just the clear shot. This is what we're doing here, guys. I thought that was amazing.
Well, that's kind of a funny rule when you think about it, because the USA routinely sanctions members of NATO, members of the European Union get sanctioned. It's very much a one-sided relationship. You know, it's the famous Kissinger statement that, you know, to be an enemy is dangerous, but to be an ally, a friend is fatal. And kind of the buildup to this was kind of ridiculous too, because, you know, on one hand, the USA was threatening Russia for violating North Korean sanctions, and at the same time threatening North Korea for violating Russian sanctions. So it's I think
who's the violator? Yeah.
Right. So, you know, threats to isolate someone only works when you have a certain share of the GDP. And right now, the USA's share of global GDP is smaller than the Soviet Union's was.
And shrinking.
1989 and shrinking, yes, because there were players that were not big in 1989, but are big now. I mean, China was a fraction of its size in 1989 as it is now. And not just China, though that's the most dramatic example, but, you know, you're seeing India, you're seeing other economies developing and increasing, while the USA is it's shrinking. So it's not a threat, and it's almost reverse isolation, self-isolation at this point.
Yeah, it's like that old joke that you put so many people in prison, the free people are going to be on the inside.
Yeah, that is it's such a global minority now, increasingly, that are these sanctions imposers. And, you know, it hurts when they actually do it back, because this wasn't enough. You know, the US reacts to these moves. That's all they can do, you know. Like they actually, let's move on to Hanoi, because that's when things got real. Because I think the US was solid in the belief that we have an ally here. We've been working on this for ages, and they didn't really notice that, at least for the last 2 years, hello SMO, Hanoi has been slowly clearing out the pro-US elements, those pro-capitalist elements, and that's what primed this moment. But you raise your finger. Maybe there's something you want to say before that. Go ahead, Leo.
Give me 1 second. Sorry, I have a fish in the oven. I'll be right back.
Oh, go for it. In the meantime, we'll go to Hanoi, Vietnam, and just to demonstrate we're not just speaking into the air, I'll show you the actual hug, because it's weird. I'm not going to try to say his name, but this is the Prime Minister of Vietnam as he meets Vladimir Putin, which is the daytime, the second day of the summit. But he was greeted by major Communist Party leadership at the airport at 2 a.m. By the way, he arrived at 3 a.m. in Pyongyang also. And that's where Kim met him on the landing strip at 3 a.m. on red carpet surrounded with roses. It was amazing. And just to have something cute that you might not see elsewhere, this is basically from, I don't know if there's a way to make this full screen, so we might have to just zoom in a bit, from an RT journalist. Yeah, let's go here. Well, still no zoom in, but this is Vietnamese soldiers just selfieing, with the president.
Ben, I can't hear you if you're talking.
Oh, you can't hear me when...
Yes.
Oh, maybe my audio let's cut. Sorry, I'm just saying this is Vietnamese soldiers selfieing with the presidential auras, and I'll shut up for the remainder. Oh, and officials, of course. Anyway, acute movement. You can find plenty of others, arrivals, departures, all of that. But yeah, this one was immediately condemned by the State Department. Like he shouldn't be able to travel. This is a blatant violation. They really thought, well, we had this in our corner, which is what they thought of most Africa. We have them in their corner, and they're left with what William Ruto's Nigeria. That's pretty much it. Securely in their corner, and it's just been two wonderful summits. I'm gonna wait for Leo to return, but what do you guys think? This is, by the way, what used to be French Indochina, right? The whole peninsula, which is Vietnam, Laos, two socialist countries led by communist parties, Cambodia and Thailand. Thailand wants to join BRICS. It's again pretty solidly in the other camp.
Well, I think a lot of it was, I mean, obviously the USA picked up the towel where the French dropped it in Vietnam after the Indochina War. And there was that fall. Like, when was that? When was the Chinese-Vietnamese war, which was not
the last actual war that China was involved in?
Yes, it was the Sino-Vietnamese War, and I've completely spaced out what year that is. That was 1979. So, and Leo, I was going to ask you. I'm glad you're back. I was going to ask you your opinion on Vietnamese and Chinese relations now, because I was under the impression that they're not good. Is that a correct statement, or what's the state?
There's some tension. I mean, there's some leftover residual tension from the Cold War, from the contradictions of the Cold War, stemming from the Sino-Soviet split and the various congealing of the camps, where China, unfortunately, due to circumstances, sided with the U.S. camp in the Cold War, which is not only due to circumstances. I self-criticize my people, the Chinese, a little bit more than other people would. Other people on our side would. I place at least some, or maybe even the bulk of the blame on the Chinese Communist Party for the Sino-Soviet split.
You do.
People.
No, some people. Go ahead.
Some people would disagree with me. A lot of communists in the West would disagree with me, but I think it was stemming from the ultra-leftism that Mao Zedong's later years that he had succumbed to. I think it was right to criticize the revisionism of the Soviet Union, but to allow that to cause a rift,
this deep,
in the socialist camp is disastrous for both countries and for the entire world, for the entire colonized world, because a lot of things happened in those decades that were terrible due to that split.
Yeah, I still put it like 8-2 at the foot of fucking Khrushchev, because one of the most hated historic people in the world, in my mind anyway. But I understand the perspective, and there was the late Mao period is not remembered so fondly, but that's what I love about China. They still didn't disavow Mao the way Khrushchev did Stalin. They're never ever going to do that. It was still the hero who gave birth to. Yeah.
No, but at the same time, there's a lot of self-criticism, of course. That is a central part of the communist modus operandus, the entire ethic is always self-criticize, always improve, always adapt, always learn, and never be afraid to apologize for mistakes, because no one is perfect. And the Chinese Communist Party has apologized repeatedly for the Cultural Revolution, which was an ultra leftist adventurist episode, which is of course a huge topic. I would say there's some benefits that came out of it, some good, but it was disastrous, catastrophic.
It was as bloody as the Russian Civil War. It's not. That's why Lenin isn't remembered as fondly as Stalin. It really is, a bad period.
Yeah. So in my analysis, I think there's some adventurism and some maybe euphoria from having done the revolution, and there's this revolutionary fervor that was sort of gripping the entire nation, not only the party, but the people as well. So there was this kind of, adventurism that came out of the 1970s, 60s and 70s. Yeah. So yeah, nothing justifies the split, the enmity between two socialist powers. Nothing can, there are valid reasons, there are valid arguments, but nothing can justify, nothing makes that worthwhile for the global socialist project, for China, for Russia, for North Korea. I mean, the famine in the 90s in North Korea would never have happened if the split didn't happen. I mean, the Soviet Union probably would not have been defeated if the split did not happen. And, many countries around the world were negatively affected. South Africa, right? Nelson Mandela was not able to push through the core of his project after he
all of the non-aligned movement got devastated as a result. Absolutely. I mean,
So
the first place they went, I think, no, not the first place, but Yugoslavia straight after the Soviet Union was gone as a counterbalance. We're just going to destroy this place. Everybody suffered because of this disaster. That led to, in the end, the capitulation of Russia by Gorbachev and then Yeltsin. I actually want to talk here, but I'll let you finish. Maybe you had some. I didn't want to cut you off. Sorry.
No.
What's interesting to me, Ian, this is more a question to you, is...
Well, I wanted, before you jump into that, I wanted to just follow up. So I guess my main question for Leo is, now that, because, Vietnam has traditionally been considered, in the American camp. That's what everybody says. And now that Russia is deepening the relationship, what do you think? Does this have any... does this have any consequence on Chinese and Vietnamese? The Chinese and Vietnamese relationship? Do you think?
I'll just illustrate it to you, right? So we're talking about the long one, Vietnam, right, and we're talking about the north one, right there.
Right, Vietnam.
North Korea and Vietnam. Absolute, yeah. Chinese borderlands are also bordering Russia up here, but I think it always helps to look at a map.
Because on the media, the media always portrays as Vietnam as that American ally against Chinese aggression, blah blah blah. Do you think with Russia warming more to Vietnam that China and Vietnam will also warm? What do you think?
Absolutely, I think so. I don't think it's going to cause a problem between Vietnam and China. I think again, these residual tensions of the Cold War are fading, and people are moving on, and people see the bigger picture. The Vietnamese government and the Chinese state, and they are ready to move on, absolutely, and they're ready to mend their relationship, and bygones be bygones, water under the bridge, and I think they are absolutely ready to consolidate.
Yeah, I mean, I know Laos is like a prime part of the Belt and Road Initiative with brand new railways, but I thought that this hatchet was buried a long time ago, like Vietnam, China. I thought they got along splendidly for at least the last decade. Maybe I wasn't. Of course, I saw the Western press saying, of course, you're in our camp. You're a very good ally in the region. But yeah, I never really truly believed that.
There's still some tension, of course. There's still some leftover tension, but I don't think they're significant. And I think people are very quickly recovering, healing from those rifts, those conflicts.
Yeah, hopefully. It's not like India and China, Because by the way, the Great Brown Hope is back. Because in reaction to this, the US didn't just send kamikaze drones. That's helpful to Taiwan or the ROC, the little island of China. But they also sent Nancy Pelosi to India to kind of breathe some new life into the whole Tibet Xizang independence movement, which is an absolute.
I loved her conversation with the Dalai Lama. Did you guys read that?
No.
I watched a couple of clips, but I read the comments afterwards, like your legacy will be remembered and Xi Jinping will be forgotten.
She said to the Dalai Lama, your wisdom will be forever remembered. It's a gift to humanity, blah, blah, blah. And Xi Jinping will fade from memory and be remembered as a dictator.
We won't be credited with anything. Absolutely.
And the most brilliant part is the Dalai Lama's reply to her.
What was it?
He didn't watch this. Let us pray that Nancy can get rid of this negativity.
Wow. I despise the old pedophile, I'm sorry to say, but that was a good answer.
Well, the Dalai Lama is a very complicated character. I mean, let me remind our viewers that in an interview with the Times of India, I think it was 10 years ago in 2012, I want to say, somewhere around there, the Dalai Lama said the Tibetan people want to be part of China.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It's been there was already 3 vectors of attack that has failed. Right, Hong Kong City returned from British rule. They have all the British judges are now fucking resigning. Oh, we don't feel okay here. Then there was the Uyghurs, as people say, right? The genocide that they say in Xinjiang. Now, when all the Arab nations or Muslim majority nations visited and saw, well, this is fine, there's no genocide, then that fell to the sideways. And we're going back to Tibet. It sounds like it's from the 90s, that's when I remember the Dalai Lama being this big, all free Tibet, independent shit. That's how fucking desperate they are. That is what comes across to me.
Another just minor thing about the Dalai Lama, I would like to remind people, in his biography penned by his brother, he clearly said that the biggest regret of his life was working with the CIA against China.
Well, okay, I might need to revise my opinion about this guy. I just remember the tongue licking video, and that can't leave my mind, with the kid.
Yeah, he's very, very complicated, I would say, and separating the religious doctrine, the Buddhist knowledge, and I think we have to separate that somewhat, even though Tibetan Buddhism was absolutely entangled with feudal power, feudalism,
serf-holding, ultra-rich landlord family is what they are. Yeah, the parliament in exile. Yes.
Yeah, which of course was anti-communist, but at the same time, none of this invalidates or is good cause for a complete dismissal of the Dalai Lama's legacy as a spiritual leader, or of course the vast body of knowledge and understanding that Tibetan Buddhism has to offer the world. I think that is a dialectical, because many communists. I mean, I have some disagreements with my comrades whom I love and absolutely agree on, all of the important things. But on things like this, especially the European communists who have a view of Buddhism, or even Haitian voodoo, or Cuban voodoo, things like this, they absolutely reject and dismiss as old superstition that is of no value to the modern world. I absolutely disagree with that. I think there is a tremendous value in the mountains and oceans of knowledge and understanding of our relationship to ourselves, to the universe, to each other, which at its core I absolutely believe is aligned with communism.
Okay, I think the true roots of China are, Taoism and Confucianism, and this is sort of the individualized, atomized version of it. But I respect that. Maybe you're a practicing Buddhist. I never was. I sort of went to this. like there was a short story like WOMAD, World Music Festival, and there was a big Tibetan went to the self-cleansing ceremony. You put yourself into this little gummy thing, and then you feel better for a week, and then you're back to normal. It seemed like to me like, you know, what was that stupidity the celebrities marketed in the 2010s? Kabbalah, right? Everybody remember this? I mean,
it's still pretty popular with people.
Oh, that's still a thing.
Yeah. Kanye West is studying the Kabbalah or something like that.
Of course. Okay, right.
Madonna is a huge fan of the Kabbalah. I mean, again, I don't want to dismiss the Kabbalah either. I think there are things of value in that body of knowledge that we don't have to throw away the baby along with the bathwater. I think there is a baby in there. There are babies in these ancient traditions, even as they were entangled with feudalism and later colonialism. I'm
with you. That's the big challenge for me, because the Roman Catholic Church was a very, very bad influence on my nation, and therefore I was a very militant atheist, and I'm trying to reconcile Christianity with communism and Orthodox Christianity, as the Russians have done. It's a difficult thing, but I'm definitely working on it.
Yeah, all of these religious, even the institutions, can at various times, influenced by various material conditions, social conditions, be progressive or reactionary. They have, in various times of history, been both, not at the same time, you know, reactionary or progressive. I think it's a matter of, you know, the superstructure and the base. You know, the superstructure, the religion, the religious institutions and their politics is influenced by the historical conditions, right? And yeah, and none of it, you know, if we catch, you know, a certain part of Christianity, whether in Latin America, the liberation theology, or, you know, or the evangelicals in the late 1800s that hit runaway slaves, you know, if we look at these spiritual traditions in those periods, it should not lead us to conclude that they are progressive. At all times, and their reactionary periods should not lead us to conclude that they are inherently reactionary. You know, it's a superstructure thing. It's like, you know, it's like culture. It's shaped by the circumstances and conditions of each historical era.
Yeah, I'm striving for not synergy, but the synthesis on that, you know, the two opposing views in my head. I'm striving for that. But what I wanted to ask Ian, because the Russian perspective, I hope the West, maybe we can forget the Western left is ever supporting Russia, but, you know, now he's met with the communist leaders. He also went to Ho Chi Minh's, you know, memorial to lay a wreath, right? He's respecting all these revolutionary leaders while he still loves Ilyin for some reason and doesn't really do the same for Lenin and Stalin. And what I wanted to ask was, you know, the Russian perspective on, you know, it looks like in the last 2 years, it has solidified that the West is as fucking belligerent as the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and the Russian Federation's Zyuganov's outfit have been telling him forever, for 30 years at least. And maybe there's I know there are big changes at the top of government taking place in very, very healthy directions when regards to the family, social fabric, these kinds of things. You think he will finally be able to? Will they get a stronger voice and maybe able to influence the actual deal maker in chief, which is not Trump but Putin, who always strives to get the consensus among the differing parts of Russia?
You mean the communist influence? I'm not sure I fully understand the question you're asking me. You're asking for the...
Okay, now that these two communist countries have been visited, and Zyuganov seems to be completely vindicated in everything he's been talking about the West, they want to dismantle and destroy us. Will they have a stronger voice? Will he finally pay a bit more attention to him and, you know, not just on thematic matters like some church and social issues, but actually economic issues? What do you think?
I don't know. I think Putin plays his cards pretty close to the chest, and I think, you know, there's this saying that an old dog can't learn new tricks. Not to say Putin is an old dog, but I think he is going to forever be an internationalist. It's just at this point he is a spurned internationalist. The West spurned him. I think Putin understands that at a certain point you need to just stop asking, and so he's acting. So it's just, I think it's not. I think it has less to do with ideology and more to do with he's just looking east. Just practicality. He's looking eastward because the West spurned him, and at this point, even if the American-controlled bloc extended its hand to him again, it couldn't be accepted a second time with no strings attached. Because the problem with, as they learned in 2022, any Western investment in Russia's economic development can be pulled and be gone in a day.
Yeah.
And it can be entirely a political reason for it.
And the thing is, once it's gone, the economy seems to super perform, which means it doesn't look like it was an actual blessing, more of a curse, those Western fucking investments. Because the moment they evaporated, Russia's doing exceedingly well. The World Bank data put it now above not just Germany, but Japan, right? I mean, India is next on this block. Absolutely.
I mean, the popular the popular saying is that it's that the sanctions made Russia stronger. I mean, it's a great mantra, but it's not true because best case scenario, it would be better for Russia to invest and go both east and west. It is true. It is denied. We can't deny that it is true. That's because the idea of a pan-European Union of a Russia and a Europe united into one, economic partnership would be the strongest force on earth. It would be stronger than the USA, it'd be stronger than China. You're talking an economic union spanning from one end of Eurasia to the other. We can't deny that that's
Lisbon to Vladivostok was the
was a missed opportunity, but they just don't have a
choice. It's happening. It's just happening under the Belt and Road, is what I see. But what do you think, Leo?
Well, just one small addition. I just saw the other day the Russian, I think, transports minister in the 1990s proposed a superhighway linking Moscow to.
I want to respond to that later. Yeah.
But anyway, he was proposed a superhighway link through Europe. From Russia through Europe to the US. But anyway, I just have a minor question for Ian. Like when you said, just a small clarification, when you said Putin has always been an internationalist, do you mean that in the socialist sense of internationalism, or do you mean a globalism in the neoliberal sense?
That's a great clarification. I mean in the neoliberal sense, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he's a globalist. Globalism unfortunately has and even I have negative feelings towards globalism, but just the idea of globalism.
When Trump says deep state, then it's a negative thing. When Putin says the permanent state, it's a thing like everything. Ooh, you're right winger if you say globalist. You're right winger if you say deep state, even though it has an actual palpable meaning. But yeah, go ahead.
So in the sense of what, just as a neutral term, what globalism actually means, yes, he's got these. I mean, even in that Tucker Carlson interview, when Tucker really wanted to know is Putin, going to say to this, and he still stuck to his guns that no, I believe in these international institutions, and all. So he absolutely still believes in globalism. He just kind of realized that the partners to make globalism, Russia, have a place in a globalist superstructure. The prerequisites for that happening just aren't there, so he can't even pretend to. There's just nothing to be gained from pursuing globalism at this point. And I think, and that's a great point, Leo, because I bring that up to people repeatedly, especially online. They're like, Putin's this authoritarian, hyper nationalist person. That's not remotely true. He is pretty liberal. He is globalist. He just got spurned, is what happened.
Yeah, Medvedev was a West-loving dove, and now look at him. He's the dog on the leash. Go ahead, Leo.
But again, I think when he motioned to join NATO, he knew fully well that Russia would never be allowed in. I think they must have understood. I mean, when they wanted to be part of the EU, they must have known that they would never in a million years. I mean, the Russian hordes, the semi-Asiatic, like into the European Union.
If anybody from Turkey is listening, pay attention because you're never getting in either. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think he knew. I mean, I have a small part of me again that Putin. If from the perspective that he played the game, that he pretended to be a neoliberal, riding on Yeltsin's coattails, and also convincing convincing the West that he was a neoliberal, I think bought Russia a lot of time and to develop
True.
it, and gave him the power to renationalize a lot of Russian industry, going against the neoliberal model, right?
Look,
So
as
I mean, I'm not making any conclusions here. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say anything crazy, but okay, maybe Putin's neoliberal internationalism can shift if it wasn't always something a little bit different. It can shift to a socialist internationalism.
And I do have to agree more with what I do have to agree with more with Dust than I do with Leo on this issue, because I mean, if we just look,
I wanted to say something about that too.
He dragged on for years after it was very clear that Russia was never going to be let into that treehouse, but they kept
tried and tried. Our Western partners, we're going to get along. Yes,
because as opposed to walking, because it should have been done. In hindsight, it should have been done 10 years ago. They should have just walked into Ukraine when there was no Ukrainian army to speak of.
2014, I mean, he already went into Syria saying no to that. He should have said no to this. A lot of people, including the KPRF, are saying this. I'll respond to that later. But yeah, he waited for as long as he could, and also worked very hard to sanction proof. I want to add one thing to this, because especially the 2000s, as I said, Putin enters the room. He will strive for consensus among everybody's there, the officials, the different powers, the different sections that they represent. And there was a very strong liberal, westernized oligarch sector who were very powerful, especially in the 90s, then in the 2000s, as he took the reins of a ruined country from Yeltsin, right? And he had to work with them. And the West has done this huge favor of reneging on every single agreement they ever made to Russia, and basically purging Russia of this horrific, poisonous influence, where Putin said, thank you very much. I don't know how to deal with these fuckers.
And let me just add, Putin himself, personally, I think, has a soft spot for Europe and for Germany, where he worked for many, many years.
Yes, under the auspices of the KGB, yes.
I think he has a sort of personal fondness or hoping that to avoid war. And also, of course, with Ukraine. I mean, they are brothers. He did not.
It's not just something he says. It's real, again, palpable to him. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, he did not want to do the SMO. He wanted to avoid it, as with every single possible method diplomatically. And that way of doing things is aligned with socialism, of course, with China. China wants to avoid war at all costs because it's terrible. War is great for the imperialists. War is not good for the anti-imperialist camp. So yeah, I'm not sure if him, of course he can be criticized legitimately, valid criticism, absolutely. I agree with you that he should have went in and he should have seen through the absolute insincerity of the West. But then again, he did try. I mean, history will be the judge. People will look upon this chain of events and say Putin tried everything for those eight long years to avoid war.
Very true. Yeah, I mean, very true. He just got spurned every fucking step of the way, and finally he admitted that. And that's when I became from someone who really, really disliked Putin because of his striving for consensus, which I always called basically a compromise. He's a compromise man, to finally actually turning around and taking Russia to where it belongs. But you've already brought in the SMO, so we might as well, if you like, transition to the region.
Be right back.
North of the Black Sea. All right.
I do have, since he left, right. I mean, I do have a closing statement before we transition, though. I mean, I think what really caused
Take it away, Ian.
Putin to be spurned is because it's true, like you said. I mean, he is one of Yeltsin's boys. He didn't spring up out of thin air. He was already in the Yeltsin camp and succeeded Yeltsin. But I think what's really denied Putin access to the treehouse, the cool kids club, this Western cool kids club, is that he did not eviscerate Russia, because you really have to work against your country's own interests to be allowed into the club. I mean, look at Armenia. Pashinyan, he is giving away territory, which was not even on the table to be lost to begin with. He just keeps giving, and look what's happening. He's getting those the Caesar artillery pieces. I mean, now Armenia is in the cool kids club, even though
I'm gonna say that cool kids club and Pashinyan's nation doesn't have. I hope they're gonna rule under basically Azerbaijani rule, because it doesn't have a future. That's what it looks like to me right now.
You have to sacrifice your country's future to be allowed into that globalist club. You just have to, and Putin did not do that. I think he probably just even cutting up those oligarchs. I mean, and from what people in Britain tell me, there's a lot of the current bad blood in the UK towards Russia is because that was just the place where they would launder their money. That was just Russian oligarch paradise, was the UK, which really, after their empire was lost, UK has nothing going for it. What kept them living the high life for so long is because these Russian oligarchs kept dumping all their cash in the UK. So even though UK had nothing going for it economically, it kept thinking this was just a cash cow. And then when Putin cut off the cash cow, now the Brits can't afford to heat their flats, literally.
That's a big part of English prosperity, absolutely.
The big three financial institutions of the big, I guess, the unipolar era were Tokyo, City of London, Wall Street. That's where the decision of what's going to be invested where, what's going to be built where, and how exactly we are going to subjugate the world were made. And all three centers are becoming fucking irrelevant, which is the beauty of all of this. And it wasn't Putin. It wasn't Xi Jinping. It was the West's insanity that got us to this point. So before I want to get to Ukraine, because it sort of chimes into this economic stuff that you mentioned, but I want to get back to MK's comment, and I've heard some of this. And of course, I think you're Russian, right? Which means respect your perspective. I understand there's more hardcore parties there. I regularly read the program and some of the statements of Zyuganov, and I know he has some bad associations with some oligarchs back in the day. I don't know who else hasn't, because that was a means for survival. I understand this critique. But remember, 1995 or 6, he would have been president if the US boasted about we got
rigging the election. Yes.
Yeah, our man instead of him. So it's still, if you look at the actual numbers, which is votes that parties get, that is the main opposition party in Russia, which is why I can't just dismiss what the KPRF says, because even if they're, I guess, lukewarm on some issues, they're the biggest opposition party in Russia. I mean, never mind this election, Mr. 87, because he's got the full mandate to finish whatever he started. But every year before that, KPRF is unquestionably the second largest party. Okay, over to Ukraine. I want to throw some very interesting news at you, because it's been like 27 months, right? Almost 30 months. Let's just round it up since this war. And now, Western publications are coming off. Oh, the Azov fighters, who just recently got removed from the sanctions list in the UK. Well, they had these, behind the front lines to make sure that nobody runs away or anything like that. If you try to run away, they kill you. They have these revelations, while Ukraine is so de-energized. I just have to play this clip exactly as it is, because it's so fun. This is the leader of Ukrenergo, the big, state energy company, and he's going to say the line, I think there will be English subtitles, that everything's under control before he loses power.
Українська енергосистема успішно справляється з усіма викликами.
Так. That is the country, right, which, by the way, this is Ukrenergo. There's another private one that said the next 2 winters are going to be faced without power and heating. It's completely de-energized. It's in a financial black hole. October, I think. No, it's even before that. I think it might be September, when the the date at which you don't have to repay the bondholders, as in all the debt you've incurred, just ends. You start having to repay your cash. Financial black hole. The G7 is sacrificing its financial system, especially Belgium, to try to prop this shit up. And Zelensky is going bonkers mad because the Russians are doing this either psyop or 20% real that, we know you don't get along with the Westerners, but, they actually want to coup you. You're going to be blamed for the inevitable military loss. And this goes back to our, I think, ongoing, not bet, because there's nothing right on this, with Ian, of how long this will last. I think he's general now, General Apti Alaudinov, the Ahmad Special Forces, the Chechens, who are now in the Kharkov region, said, and this is important because it made it to TASS, the Telegram Association of the Soviet Union, Sovietsky Soyuz, TT, which is SS. Anyway, the main government news source, it's that old, that he said, we're going to wrap this up before the end of the year. I'm mixed. I see the Russian numbers, 1,500 to 2,000 die a day. I see the press gangs going everywhere just to find anybody, even younger people, even older people. Horrific. But it really looks like, and of course, the US is signaling, this is your problem now, Mark Rutte, the new NATO chief. This is your problem, Europe. So show us you're the good soldiers who are paid, because there might be like a Trump curse coming around the corner. Your thoughts on the current Ukraine conflict?
Well, I mean, we've mentioned that, especially when that new Kharkov front opened up, and the Russians really do the opposite of the Ukrainians when it comes to marketing. Under promise, over deliver. The Ukrainians. And I think it's a lot of that has to do with that pressure they're under from their Western sponsors. They always promise the moon and the stars every single time. They were really acting like that counteroffensive is going to bring them to the gates of Sevastopol, and then they didn't even make it 10 kilometers into the
first defensive
line. Yes, the first defensive line. They took a few villages, and that
was last year, and they're still speaking about a new counteroffensive. Still,
yes, and so with the Russians opening up another front, they had the ability to do that. They had enough. The ratio of forces in play was enough to their favor that they could just extend the front and put more pressure on the Ukrainian line, because they'd have to send reserves elsewhere. And that kind of put Ukrainians in an impossible choice, because they don't have the reserves to cover everything. And you
can correct me. You know the number, I think. It's just 50 or 70,000 they sent in. It's not like a big occupation force to capture Kharkiv. It was there to cause problems and drain reserves, which they have from Chasov Yar, which is now the main battle taking place way down in Donetsk as a result of this.
Well, if a force is insufficient to be a danger, it can just be. So it's only a threat if it's actually a threat. So it did have a threat to approach Kharkov if it was ignored. So the Ukrainians couldn't ignore it. They can't lose Kharkov. So they had to send all these reserves. And of course, that means they lose ground in the Donetsk direction. And the big thing is, and the problem that Ukrainians have is that, not only are they kind of at a numerical disadvantage, but they have a very small number of units that are capable of doing offensive action, like counterattacks. Because it's one thing, like a territorial defense force can do limited defensive actions because those are easier, but a military offensive takes a higher level of training, it takes a higher level of mechanization, and so there's very few units that do that. So to move units to the northern front and do counterattacks, which it looks like the Ukrainians are going to try to do, they're going to try to push Russians back to the border, and there are satellite images of Russians building trenches there, so they're anticipating worst case scenario. They don't lose all of the territory. If they have to fall back, they won't lose all of it. They can fall back to the trenches that they're building now behind. The problem is that there's a finite number of Ukrainian units that can do that, and now they're all in the Kharkov region. They left the eastern and southern fronts. So they're trying to defend everything, and the risk of that is you could have a general collapse if they just lose. So we don't know.
I want to ask you, then we'll get to Leo, especially in Europe being on the hook for everything.
Mhm.
But there's this website, and not many Russian units have a proper like PR website. But this North Wind, I'm trying not to butcher it, but it's Severny Veter, which is the website of the Group of Forces North, this newly created thing that went into that region, also allegedly into Sumy. And every day, what they put out, it's very cool but belligerent, is come on, counterattack us, you fucking pussies. And they do. They always attack, and they lose this enormous amount of men, which is, just draining away those very precious and last reserves that they have. So the West, in the face of this, is getting really desperate. Here, I want to talk a bit about the hardware, because I think it's not yet passed, but the Germans. By the way, the Germans, the French, the Italians, they have record deficits, and even it goes against Brussels rules, how indebted they are. And the Germans are now going to order 100 tanks to equip their little battalion in Lithuania. Like now, I don't know what speed they're churning it out at, but okay, they might be ready by 2027 or something like that. Meanwhile, the West, I mean, it didn't have much, when people trust you. I'm looking for this word. I don't know why I'm blanking on this. But anyway, it didn't have much trust left from the Allies. And what they did, it was all over. Confidence is good. Is all right. Everything you ordered in terms of air defense missiles, which includes the Patriots and the NASAMS. Sorry, Allies, you'll all have to wait, because all of that is going to Ukraine. And Romania, poor Romania, under occupation, I guess, is transferring one.
Credibility.
Credibility is a good one, Schwasta. One Patriot system, which we know are actively being hunted, because the Russians absolutely published this. They're gloating, oh, this isn't nearly as good as you thought, or we thought it was. And it's like the last of what's wealth, what's the wealth left in Europe is going to be, and credibility when it comes to the banking system is being drained away at Project Ukraine. And I think, whoever's behind the cadaver in the White House is sitting comfortably. We're an ocean away. Fuck it. Let them end up in ashes. We'll be fine. Is what's shaping up to be. But Leo, I want to bring in something, because last weekend was the big fiasco of the Swiss Peace Summit, and before that, Vladimir Putin gave what he said was the last peace offer. You leave these 4 oblasts, which are forever Russia, and we will stop the hostilities, get into, of course, they rejected it, and start negotiations right away. Now, they rejected it, and then Pyotr Tolstoy, one of the leaders of the leading Duma speaker, the Russian parliamentary speaker, said, that was the last offer we're going to give you. The next one is going to be unconditional surrender that we expect from Kiev. That's it. We're done at the negotiation table. How do you think this looks to the NATO stand heads, all these unelected idiots who, I think on Monday, the leaders of Europe had this informal dinner to discuss who's going to be the top of the main jobs in Europe, which, in case people still don't know, because the Irish don't understand how we can be so warlike, it all comes from the European Commission, led by Ursula at the moment. He's trying to be reappointed, I guess. That's where rules, policy, everything is made by think tanks. Then it goes through the European Parliament, who don't have any right to do anything. They can discuss it, maybe suggest amendments. That's it. And then it ends up in the Council, Charles Michel's, who can approve it, who can rubber stamp it. The true power has always been in the Ursula camp, right? And they think anything here can change, right? The absolute undemocratic, stupid bloc that Europe is. Sorry, that was a sidetrack, and I don't know where I began, but you might have followed better than I myself did. Sorry.
Well, I just wanted to say, it turns out that one graveyard of empires is not enough. And
Afghanistan was the famous one, right?
Yeah. We need another one. Ukraine, maybe enough to bury the empire. But how they respond? How can they respond? They have no options except, risk everything, risk fucking nuclear war. Risk their countries. For how much longer can it go? We don't really know how much the European electorate, elections even matter. We don't know how
we've just learned that they don't.
Yeah, exactly.
So by the way, the guy, the main guy for Le Pen is called Bardella or something like that, who was supposed to be the new Hitler, the new alt-right, because he said, I'm going to exit NATO. He said, no, we're actually staying in NATO. No, we're going to support Ukraine. We're just not. He's been melanized. He's been completely melanized, cucked.
All of them. Le Pen, AfD in Germany, all of them are fake anti-war, fake. But anyway, I wanted to bring up one thing. I just have heard talk of Centuria, the
that's the legion, the terrorist legion that is in Europe, Ukrainian.
The offshoot of Azov. I've just heard some numbers that there are 7,000 Centuria members actively training in Germany, like 6,000 in France, something like 4,000 in Britain, and like another 10,000 in the rest of Europe. I mean, this is part of the blowback, right? Part of the title of this show. That's fucking scary as fuck.
Absolutely. I mean, there's already been, I think, gang fighting between police and gangs somewhere in Spain with weapons earmarked for Ukraine. And there's obviously just going to be more of that the closer they come to absolute defeat, which they are.
Yeah. So all of this is just mounting into a really, really seems to be going to be unmanageable fever pitch of chaos in Europe. I mean, France is already on the verge.
Jesus, can you imagine the Olympics taking place there?
Yeah, it's absolutely a clusterfuck. It's absolutely a shit show. Garbage dump on fire. It's really, really sad. And
Russia held the friendship games. They were safe.
Yeah.
I don't
if you
know
want to
about
cause trouble in France, I mean, that's a good day to earmark when the Olympics happen.
As they say, it's target rich, unfortunately, if someone's got a grudge. And there's going to be so many grudges, man. Because, every time NATO posts something, we're stronger than ever, more determined than ever. Increasingly, the Ukraine flags that still exist on Twitter, they feel fucking betrayed. And I get it. I get where they're coming from. I hate banderites, but fuck yeah, they were. You were supposed to be the carne por machina, the meat for the machine. That is what Lindsey Graham outright said until the last Ukrainian. Didn't you get that? This is what a deal with the West means. Destruction, death.
Yeah,
and go.
Again, I have to remind people that the Chechens, the Chechens had a brutal war.
Brutal.
With Russia, or like you can call it an invasion. Russia went into Chechnya to put down the Western-backed fundamentalists trained and funded to fight Russia. And the Chechens, after 10 years, realized that they were fooled, that they were tricked, that they were used, that they were cannon fodder for the imperialist West. They fully realized that. Chechnya is absolutely pro-Russian Federation today, and of course, the amazing Chechen fighters were like a significant role in the SMO. Of course, fighting for Russia. What's that guy's name?
Ramzan Kadyrov, who always said the right thing, but 2 weeks early. Ramzan Kadyrov with the big beard. The son of the original Kadyrov who made the deal with Putin to end the bloodshed. Yes.
Yeah. And the same thing will happen in Ukraine with Ukrainians. I mean, all of this will pass, and what comes next, right, will be revenge against the West. Will be revenge against NATO countries, against EU countries, and it's going to be ugly. It's going to be really, really scary.
Unfortunately, yeah. I
do
agree, and I know there's still tensions with between the Chechens and the Orthodox, but I think they're minimal compared to the war.
I was going to say, but the Chechens, I mean, they did achieve independence.
They're autonomous oblast.
Yes, and
Federation, federation state.
Is there terrorism and invasion of Dagestan that prompted the Russians to take it back? And it's the same thing with Ukraine. There was nothing preventing Ukraine from continuing to be an independent state. It was their aggression against Donbass that caused this to happen. So it's really, and we have to remember too that economically, if there was no war, Ukraine would have already collapsed. They were already on the verge of bankruptcy.
Complete life support. They need a needle in the arm every once. I think they were talking about 800 billion pounds, which is $1 trillion, somewhere in the British press. A Ukrainian official said that's what we need to beat the Putin.
Yeah, so it's
the entire U.S. military budget. Sorry, I'm shutting up now.
Yeah. So it's the same thing with Afghanistan. You couldn't even, the people who collaborated with the coalition with the ISAF couldn't. Most of them couldn't even leave the country. Those were the guys clinging to the wheels of the airplane. And I remember we had these conversations with Ukrainians in summer of 2021. It's like, don't you feel like this is going to be you if there's a war? And they're like, no. They said, I think Ukrainians feel like, oh, we're too white, we're too European. Americans won't screw us over. I really think that was the thinking. We're Aryans, we're Europeans, we're part of the, the
I
white
remember.
boys. We're part of the white boy summer, basically.
I remember the first few months of the SMO, the Ukrainian reports, we are blonde and blue-eyed Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, can you be more outright what you mean? Yeah, I remember that.
But I don't think they understood. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're white, black, or purple. Washington and Wall Street will still dump you when you are done. They'll still tell you what you want to hear. They'll say, cool tattoo, cool black sun tattoo. Yes, you're Aryan, you're democratic, you're better than those orcs. They'll tell you whatever you want to hear. Feed, whatever. And I think though that's why they like, even though Washington, even though the USA is completely liberal and, nationalism is bad, they'll still feed these little right-wing fantasies these people in Eastern Europe have because they're useful for people to believe those things.
And they all become magically democratic countries, very free media, very free elections, whatever the facts are, they automatically become that.
Yeah, that is the original reason why, whiteness was invented in the first place, is to divide and to sacrifice the white working class under the tyranny of capital. And it still plays the same role in the world today. It's,
this was Narishkin, the SVR, the Russian foreign intelligence, right? A guy who said, I don't know how much of it is a psyop, but he said, yeah, he's going to be the scapegoat for the West for when the military defeat actually comes. It, might be 80% a psyop, but they do have good information from Kiev. I'm pretty certain of that. They are aware of all the internal stuff that goes on in the Verkhovna Rada. So interesting. Will be interesting to see his fate, but they're definitely playing on his nerves because, the Financial Times already reports that he's paranoid. Like, he had a conversation with Blinken and he was very upset that Blinken kept talking about, corruption. Like, come on, leave my slice of the things here. Elena Zelenska had this major piece, an exclusive interview in the British Telegraph, where she's waiting, of course, for the moment of victory, but she's undergoing these nervous, close to burnout things. That's where they are mentally, and you could see this at the Swiss summit, like completely megalomaniacal. I'm not going to conquer that word anyway.
Let me just add one little analysis on a kind of philosophical, ideological tip.
Take away.
Drawing a parallel between Chechnya and Xinjiang, the socialist approach to violent extremism and the non-socialist approach. Of course, the Russian forces putting down the fundamentalists in Chechnya was absolutely legitimate, absolutely necessary. But China's method was very different in putting down the violent jihadists, separatists, Wahhabists that were funded by
both places. The ideology came from Saudi Arabia at the time. Yeah,
from Saudi Arabia. And with CIA funding, of course. I'm going to
add Kosovo to that, who didn't learn this lesson. Same operation.
Yeah. But the socialist approach, right? It comes down to a very deep philosophical difference in a different conception of evil. and justice, right? The Western or imperialist, which has much deeper roots, of course, in the philosophical foundations and Christianity, blah, 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 is that evil exists as an independent force in the universe, right? This idea, I think, is at the fundament, the root of a lot of things, of a lot of world events and everything. The prison system in the USA, the punitive conception of justice, right? There are evil people and there are evil nations, and when they are evil, if you accept this premise, fundamental premise, then they must be punished and they must be destroyed. We must pursue regime change. We must bomb, sanction. We must exact punishment for the evil countries and evil individuals. While the socialist philosophy is completely different. Fundamentally, evil does not exist.
Oh, yin and yang, very Taoist. Yep.
The great, the very popular
the two wolves
saying no, just religious saying that the greatest trick the devil played on us is that he doesn't exist, right? This is the popular
devil's advocate when Al Pacino was great. Yes,
right. Well, the socialist philosophy is the exact opposite. Evil does not exist. It is the absence of light. Darkness is the absence of light, and there are only
I like that.
There are no evil people in the world. There are no evil nations. There are only individuals who are abused, who are sick, who are confused, who are not healthy, right? And so the socialist conception of justice has always been reformed, very humanist. If you look at the Gulag system of the Soviet Union, average stay was 7 years, and they're promised full integration back into society after they leave the prison system, guaranteed a job, and not at all demonized in society. They're not outsiders exiled forever, like in the US. If you have a criminal record, you can't get a job, your life is over. And this also animates the geopolitical way of engagement, right? The Chinese
famous non-interference in interior
absolutely
matters.
Absolutely. The socialist model is that there are no evil nations. There are only nations that are having difficulties, that are infected by extremism or whatever it is. And they can, the idea is that every country can solve their own problems if given stability, if given economic stability and social stability, if given harmonious, healthy economy conditions, right? They can solve their own problems, and individuals can heal as well, and countries can heal, right? And so China trades with everyone. China trades with Israel. China trades with Saudi Arabia. China trades with everyone. So I just wanted to point out this very fundamental philosophical difference.
I think that was great and educational. So thanks, Leo. Maybe I wanted to avoid the fucking US elections because it would be a great episode not to go there. But that informed me about. I watched something. I'm just going to plug.
Before we go into that.
No, not going to that. I'm just going to recommend the live stream, which was between Garland Nixon, DD Geopolitics, Sarah, and I think John Jenkins, MAGA communist variety. And something that Garland said stuck with me. He doesn't see the MAGA people as, what Hillary said, deplorables automatically. There was people who are economically hurt. They've been screwed by the system. Maybe they automatically revert to some stupid stances. But that's I think how they should be seen. Like they're just being shafted like anybody else. Anyway, forget that. The last leg of the journey where the US is suffering this final decay is, of course, West Asia, where Israel wants to go like full out with Hezbollah, which would be very close, I think, to its final collapse, its final doom. And the response, I don't know. Do we just want to listen to 49 seconds of Netanyahu in the?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Apparently echoing Churchill, but getting Zelensky vibes here.
When Secretary Blinken was recently here in Israel, we had a candid conversation. I said I deeply appreciated the support the U.S. has given Israel from the beginning of the war. But I also said something else. I said it's inconceivable that in the past few months, the administration has been withholding weapons and ammunition to Israel. Israel, America's closest ally, fighting for its life, fighting against Iran and our other common enemies. Secretary Blinken assured me that the administration is working day and night to remove these bottlenecks. I certainly hope that's the case. It should be the case. During World War II, Churchill told the United States, give us the tools, we'll do the job. And I say, give us the tools and we'll finish the job a lot faster.
Kill everyone because everybody is Hamas is the takeaway from that, even though he echoes Churchill, who was another very genocidal asshole, just ask the Indians. But he's upset. How could you stop one shipment of heavy bombs? And obviously now all the air defense missiles are going to go to Ukraine. How dare you not allow us finish the job? And by the way, the new cover of The Economist magazine was just 2 words and this lonely flag, Israel alone. That's it. That's the new Economist cover. British fucking financial media. But anyway, that's how isolated this mad guy is. And he might just want to blow up the region, even though it's not in the US interest. 2 things about the US military here. The Eisenhower, there was this big rundown interviews with the crew saying, well, they're experiencing fatigue. They've been fighting for 6 months, like in most intensive battles since World War II, and they're experiencing fatigue. And the European compartment of that, which is Operation Aspides, I think that's shield in Greek. The leader of that fucking thing said, we just have half the, we need twice the fleet to actually handle this Houthi situation, you know? They got their ass handed to them by Yemen with no fucking navy. And, you know, they just sank the first drone sinking of a ship, this coal carrier, bulk carrier belonging to, I don't know under what flag, but it was related to Israel. And it just sent even further the insurance costs. And this guy is there alone in a country that's also economically dying, no weapon shipments. And he wants to go out against a far superior enemy compared to Hamas. The third and final front is what it looks like to me. Take it away.
I say it's, well, I mean, one on the Eisenhower, I mean, I do want to mention it on the show because there is that controversy of whether, because the Eisenhower did come under attack, and there were some photos that were apparently all doctored or old photos. So I think at this point it's true. The Eisenhower, there was no cover up. The Eisenhower wasn't hit. It is fatiguing. 6 months. You know, people say,
you need repairs, you need resupply.
Yes. Well, and not just that, but the crew. If you're on alert all the time, I don't know what kind of sorties they're flying, what kind of missions they're flying. But if you're just under attack all the time, I mean, you're always on alert. It disrupts your sleeping schedules. I mean, it's 6 months on a ship of always in action is a long time. So I find that I don't think that's a cover story. You know, I've seen some people suggesting it's a cover story. No, I don't think so. I think they are just overextended on the Eisenhower. It's completely plausible. And yeah, I mean, it does illustrate that the Houthis, that, you know, the USA is struggling to put down the Houthis, you know, struggling to put down Yemen. I mean, it shows that, yeah, I think the USA is, I wouldn't even say it's because the USA is weaker. It's just that the power dynamics are different. It's not that the USA has gotten weaker. It's that everybody else has gotten stronger. The gap between the colonizer and the colonized is a lot smaller than it was certainly 100 years ago and 50 years ago and even 10 years ago. It's shrinking.
It looks like Ukraine rewrote the book, even though they probably, you know, mostly supplied by Iran. Obviously, I wouldn't call them a proxy, but they're supplied. Hezbollah is supplied. But, you know, drone warfare changed the game. Hypersonics, which the US.
Nasrallah, not Ukraine. You mean?
No, I meant Ukraine as in the actual outbreak of the SMO. Look, these are vaunted NATO weapons and they can burn like anybody else, where people who opposed the hedge. What fucking kind of hegemon can't, keep the trade routes open at sea? I mean, it's huge. These last 2 years have been a geopolitical earthquake, is what
I think it's a true statement. I think that's an accurate statement. I think the Russians were the first to resort to violence. And then once the blood was drawn, that was a domino effect that we're seeing in other places. It's like you said, it's that once that paper tiger is exposed and other people start poking it too. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
West Africa.
Lost by the US and by France. Amazing. It's just like the Putin summits. They couldn't conceive of this a year ago, that this could happen. They thought everything was secure and dandy. Biggest drone base was in Niger, right?
Yep.
Fuck off.
Yep.
Go home.
Yep.
Russians, come on in.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's why I say this is a time of mourning of all of these things, but also of celebration. If we truly side with the oppressed of the world, if we truly, in 500 years, how many African armies have been completely decimated by the colonial powers over the last 500 years? How many, dozens, hundreds of, African armies have been just completely wiped clean, and there was never a chance to breathe. There was a brief moment of decolonization in the 60s, but then, of course, immediately followed by recolonization under the guise of neoliberal, neocolonialism, and there was never a chance to break free. And now it's everything's changed. Now the colonial forces are absolutely being driven out, and they're losing. And this is in 500 years is the first. So it's a time to celebrate as well. Maybe not celebrate, but be hopeful and optimistic.
I know this isn't like a nice thing to do, but there is some schadenfreude I get from thinking of Macron, born with a silver spoon, like a banker creation, never worked a proper job in his life. Like he got smacked in the mouth with the Ukraine thing. There's a lot of French videos, doesn't matter. And now they're revoking the mining licenses. He's going to have to get uranium at proper market prices. One in 3 light bulbs in France was powered by Nigerian uranium, and I'm just trying to imagine how that happens. Like his whole world, this whole Sahel region, the CFA Franc region, is gone, like irreversibly. Yeah.
And in the meantime, well, first of all, I have to really personally watch my Schadenfreude, because me as a person,
it's not nice.
Since my teenage years, have lived in the West and have been dehumanized for the shape of my eyes my entire adult life. It's very easy for me to feel some Schadenfreude, to put it lightly, seeing the collapse of Britain and the entire West. But it is fundamentally a reactionary attitude, to take delight in the downfall of even the colonial empire, because we have to remember that the working class suffer from these same regimes. The working class are even when they are reactionary, it's not really their fault. They've been breathing imperialist, capitalist ideology for generations, for 5-10 generations. It's not really their fault.
And they will be the first to suffer in France, in Germany, in the US. Yeah, that just.
Well, there is a Stalin quote from February 1942 when he said, Hitler's come and go, but Germany and the German people will remain. So,
yeah.
And we talk about what you said earlier, Leo, about this concept of good and evil. We have to punish nations of people for these things that they did. I think we can see that playing out here. The USA sees that power dynamic, and it doesn't really even properly reward obedience. It just lets you continue to exist at some level, there's no alliances to it. It wants supremacy. Like the Philippines and the USA is not an alliance. The Philippines it's just the USA's lapdog. Again, it's about exerting U.S. supremacy against China. The Philippines, and what the Philippines need aren't even in the equation. And that's Same with
There's
Ukraine.
no consideration for them. Yeah.
Yeah, the Ukraine and Philippines are in the same boat.
Yeah.
What-
And the beauty
Like
about
Taiwan.
what you said, people wishing evil on an entire country, the Z accounts, even from the beginning of the war, the Russian people who cheer on the SMO, they never called for the extermination of the Ukrainian people, ever. But every other day, I see every Russian should be slaughtered from the yellow and blue fucking flags. There's a huge, huge qualitative difference in there. I think we're close to wrapping up, but I thought I mentioned this earlier. I'm in Southwest Hungary, Ian's in Moscow, and Leo is tuning in from Berlin. So maybe we have some concluding thoughts. I had one final video, which is a response, I think, out of many things also to who brought up the Carlson interview with Putin? I think
I
Ian
did, yeah.
Yeah, the latest, it's not really an advisory, just a statement by, I think it was Miller, right? Hold on a sec. Yeah, Miller, the State Department is basically you should just not go to Russia.
No American citizen for any reason should travel to Russia. And I know this is sometimes comes down to a very painful choice for Americans who have family members in Russia, sometimes family members with health problems that they want to see, but you run a tremendous risk by traveling to Russia of being detained, being imprisoned, being convicted.
Yeah, all of that. The big bad Russians are going to put you in a gulag is the message. They stopped Scott Ritter from going. Thank goodness. Anybody who goes there, including Tucker Carlson, comes back with rave stories. Jackson Hinkle is currently there. Also in Ukraine, former Ukraine. I think that's what Medvedev means. For a couple of months, he always says F Ukraine when he's talking about Ukraine. Anyway, just don't go there. Don't look around. That's the message coming from there. Finishing final thoughts, guys. What do you think?
Same thing for Xinjiang. They advised traveling to Xinjiang to see a region that is in many ways more developed, more modern than Paris.
You should have seen the comments when Putin left Pyongyang. And everybody was out on the streets. The paid actors, the regime is at their back with a gun. They just can't take it. Beautiful infrastructure, completely built from the ground. They just can't take it.
Yeah, maybe we can conclude on the power of propaganda. Because the Philippines, the Philippines are so traumatized. They and confused and propagandized, right? Posting F-16s and bald eagles and stars and stripes online, legions and legions of Filipinos with absolute hatred of their neighboring peaceful country who has used a water cannon or two, absolutely in love with the U.S., which committed genocide, mass rape, mass murder against the Philippines after taking the colonial reign from Spain. It's just the power of fucking propaganda. It's absolutely amazing. But I think, to people who say well, what about the Russians who hate Putin, or what about what about the Ukrainians who hate Russia? What about I think Israel puts all of that to rest, because we can say to them, well, okay, 90% of Israeli citizens support the genocide, right? And they will say to you,
yeah.
They will say to you, we live in Israel. We understand the history and the reality of Israel better than you. So, what are these libs going to say again? Are they going to side with them because they live in Israel and they understand the situation better? No, obviously not. So that puts to rest that entire very common argument.
Yeah,
I think Israel. My cousin does that. I think it is. I don't think it could be said often enough. What's happening now in Gaza shows the total, not just hypocrisy, but just absurdity of all of the accusations that the Western rules-based order, as they like to call themselves. That's what they call themselves. Liz Truss, all those people, rules.
Yeah, because you can't say international law.
Yeah.
That's why they came up with this phrase. Yeah,
rules-based world order. It's just genocide, punishing civilians, start to weaponizing hunger. All that is just total bullshit. And they do even the worst things Russia's been accused of in Ukraine. What they're doing now in Gaza is 10 or 100 or 1,000 times worse. Yeah. It's absurd. So.
It's the only democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah,
Oh,
but it's a
excuse me,
tiny
right?
sliver of land with previously, well, almost 2 million people smacked in there. And the larger bomb, I think it was Nagasaki, they dropped the equivalent of 3 of those on this tiny, tiny sliver of land and didn't defeat Hamas. Meanwhile, engaged in the craziest propaganda. So, yeah. I think the takeaway after this is, by the way, this was a 100 peso note for a while. I think in the 2000s they changed it. There were 2 flags on it. So it kind of shows you that's the American flag on the Philippine 100 peso. It kind of shows you if you don't have information independence, which will be a pillar of the new multipolar world, which India unfortunately also doesn't have, then goodbye sovereignty. That would be my closing thought. I'm sorry it's a bit solemn. There was a lot of hope, though, in today's and very good comments. So thank you both for being here. Thank you also every viewer and commenter. It was a very lively comment stream. So thanks everyone. Thanks Das Schwaster and Christy has been very, very kind to me. Thank you very much.
Big up yourself.
Right. Yeah. Have a great weekend and catch you all, I think, Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Yeah.